Jaxon Smith-Njigba, the consensus rookie wide receiver one at the moment, number 4 overall player in rookie drafts in Superflex at the moment, according to Keep Trade Cut, number 2 overall player in one quarterback drafts. What we're going to aim to answer with this video is, does he belong up there? That's the question that we're going to tackle. We're going to dig into everything JSN, break him down all the way to the studs, and determine how you guys should be handling him in rookie drafts this coming May. But before we get into it, as always, let's hit the intro. All right, so Jaxon Smith-Njigba, wide receiver of the Ohio State Buckeyes. This is his tale of the tape. Let's start with his background information. JSN was a 5-star high school recruit coming from Rockwell, Texas. Number 5 wide receiver in the 2020 recruiting class. He goes on to Ohio State as a freshman, did not get on the field very much, playing behind the likes of Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Jamison Williams, who eventually transferred to Alabama, in a run-heavy offense as well with Justin Fields and Channing most of the on-the-ground work. But as a true sophomore, he really broke onto the scene. We saw the fireworks. JSN posted 112 targets, 95 receptions, 1,595 receiving yards, and 9 touchdowns with an absurd 15 catch, 336 3-touchdown performance in the 2021 Rose Bowl against Utah. The only game that he got to play with both Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson not on the field for Ohio State. You guys know probably what the narrative is around JSN at this point in time. The splits when all 3 are healthy are this, though. It's not as simple as saying that JSN outproduced these other 2 guys, because a big chunk of that production came in that Rose Bowl game when both of them were off the field preparing for the 2022 NFL Draft. It's still impressive nonetheless, but it is noteworthy saying that these are the actual splits when all 3 of them were on the field together, because JSN did not out-target either wide receiver. He did not have more targets per route run than either wide receiver, and Wilson outproduced him pretty much across the board. Yards, targets, touchdowns, receptions, all that stuff. And Olave also had more touchdowns than JSN did in 2021. He was, however, the most efficient wide receiver of the group in yards per route run. So that's definitely very impressive. And I'm not diminishing how impressive his 2021 campaign was, because he did outproduce to some degree 2 top 12 draft picks on the field. Just clarifying the accuracy of the narrative around JSN, that he did not, 1-for-1 outproduce those guys across the board. He did, however, in some categories. So Jaxon Smith-Njigba, current draft stock right now is about a mid-first round pick. His average draft position, according to many of the expert, fan, and media mock drafts, according to Grinding the Mocks, is about 14th overall, which is where the New England Patriots pick, and that would also be a very big need for them. So let's get into some film here to determine what are the pros and cons of Jaxon Smith-Njigba's game. Let's start off with the 6 fundamental traits of the wide receiver. And the first trait is your ability to get open. If we were playing football on a playground right now, I would probably throw the ball to the person that is open most consistently, and route running is the fundamental area of how you get open. An area that Jaxon Smith-Njigba, by the way, is not lacking in whatsoever. As a true sophomore in 2021, which is most of the tape that we have on JSN, he worked primarily out of the slot. 89% of the time, he was working out of the slot. You can see a number of these plays that he can uncover extremely well versus zone coverage. This is his best attribute as a route runner, is his ability to get open versus zone coverage. He's great at finding holes in the zone coverage. He positions himself well so that CJ Stroud has a throwing lane, finds him uncovering against zone. I'm curious to see how he performs against man coverage, according to reception perception, when Matt Harmon actually drops it, which will probably be in the next couple weeks or so. For me, I look at reps like this, where you guys can see him playing on the outside against press man coverage. And even though he's not getting the ball on these plays, you can see him uncovering quickly against the press coverage, getting a separation off the line clean. And if he was the first read on these plays, he probably would have gotten the ball and, broken tackles and doing what JSN does. So JSN posted 99th percentile agilities at the NFL Combine, which indicates that he should be quite good at beating man coverage. But to me, it is still a bit of a question mark for him, because he did play against primarily zone coverage over the middle in the slot, but he is very good in that aspect. And we know that you pretty much only have to win at one of those phases in the NFL, and most NFL teams play zone coverage for the most part. So that is a big time W in the route running category for Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Now let's talk about his hands, right? Once you get open, you have to catch the ball. And it's not simply don't drop it. It's also, are your hands an asset? Do you catch balls outside your frame? Can you make contested catches? Are you making hands catches versus body catches? JSN had a 5.9% drop rate in 2021 on as a true sophomore. So some of those drops were concentration drops, like you guys can see on the screen right now. His hands are good, but they're not elite. They're not great. He doesn't blow you away with crazy out of his frame catches, but part of that is the role that he played, right? Most of his targets were over the middle of the field, average depth of target of 9.3, which is like below the sticks type of targets. So most of the time, his job was just to catch the ball, run with it, get the first down, make downfield plays when necessary. But for the most part, he wasn't catching deep passes down the field 30 plus yards and, housing a 60-yard touchdown. That was not his role. His role was to get the first down. His role was to run after the catch. His 96.8% catchable target rate was actually the best in the class. And like I said, some of that is aided by the fact that he had a lot of easy targets, and he also played with the most accurate quarterback in college football in CJ Stroud. But it does still showcase the fact that his hands are reliable. They're not necessarily a huge dominant factor of his game, but his hands are reliable over the middle of the field, which is exactly what they need to be in the role that he's probably going to play in the NFL. Now we get to the third fundamental trait, which is once you get open, once you catch the ball, what do you actually do with it? Yards after catch. Can you make people miss after the catch? This is probably his best trait, in my opinion, on field. There's no shortage of clips that you guys can see of him running with the ball in his hands after securing the catch, making people miss, breaking tackles, running away from people. And this is what makes JSN such a great fit for a primary slot role, a high volume role for us in fantasy. Looking at guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown this past year, Chris Godwin back in 2019, those guys demanded volume roles because they were so efficient on otherwise inefficient targets, right? The difference between Amon-Ra St. Brown last year and Juju Smith-Schuster is when one of them gets a 6-yard target, it turns into a 20-yard completion, and the other one gets a 6-yard reception because he falls down and can't make anybody miss after the catch. So when your slot receiver has the ability to avoid tackles on 20% of his receptions, which is what JSN did in his sophomore season, 50% of his yards came after the catch, which was the fourth highest rate in the class. JSN has the ability to take that 5-yard completion, that 4-yard slant route, and turn it into a 15-yard catch, an 18-yard catch, sometimes a 40-yard catch. And I've seen him comp to CeeDee Lamb a little bit by some draft analysts. And I think this is where that comp stems from, because CeeDee Lamb was very good against, zone coverage and very good after the catch when he played at Oklahoma. And he does that at a very high level in the NFL as well. And of course, he's developed into more of a 3-level threat, which I'm going to get into right now, because how are you deployed is a very important part of our fantasy production, is the fourth fundamental trait. Because if you are deployed like Juju Smith-Schuster, chances are you're going to lose some fantasy points, versus if you're deployed like DK Metcalf, you're working a lot more downfield. Where JSN loses some points for me in my grade is that you don't see a ton of downfield usage out of him. It's not necessarily his fault, because the role that he was asked to play at Ohio State was that of the short to intermediate target, because they already had Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, who I think, especially Olave, his best trait coming out last year was his ability to affect all 3 levels of the field. Both of those guys ran in the 4-3s. JSN is more of a 4-5 guy. It makes sense to deploy him in that role. But I do have to ding him in his grade for being a short target and a slot guy somewhere. And this is where I had to do that, because playing 89% of the snaps out of the slot hurts his profile a little bit, because NFL teams will view him primarily as a slot receiver, even if he can do it on the outside, which I believe he can do. And I believe he can develop into a wins on the outside versus man press coverage like most other great wide receivers of JSN's profile can do. Some of the NFL teams are going to have questions about his ability to do that. I'm confident that he can do it based on the athleticism that we saw from him at the combine and his pro day. Brief times that he did get downfield targets, we did see him work downfield a little bit. But it is still my biggest question mark with JSN. How well can you affect all 3 levels of the field, or are you just a short to intermediate slot target? If he becomes a primary slot, 9 average depth of target like he was in college, in a pass-heavy offense with a great quarterback, he can absolutely still be a wide receiver 1 in fantasy, just like Amon-Ra St. Brown was this past year. But it does make him a little bit more landing spot dependent, in my opinion. So let's get into the 5th fundamental trait, which is athleticism, right? Can you translate what you did in college to the NFL? Are you at least an NFL caliber athlete? And I think we can say with certainty that Jaxon Smith-Njigba is. An 8.3 RAS score, very solid across the board. He doesn't possess elite speed, like I've already kind of talked about. He ran a 4.52 at his pro day, but it is still very solid speed for the role that he's going to play in the NFL. Agility scores were the important part for the role that he's going to play, and he nailed those. Like I mentioned earlier, 99th percentile across the board in the agility ranks. His 8.3 RAS score ranks in the 83rd percentile, and he also boasts good size if he's going to work over the middle as well. 6'1", 196 pounds. He's not going to, break down from big hits over the middle from linebackers and safeties. So that is definitely good news for JSN. And then finally, the sixth fundamental trait is how do they produce? What is their profile on paper? Because we know wide receivers are very, very reliant on production to determine future success. Things like target share, yards per team pass attempts, breakout age, these things do have a high correlation to NFL success and fantasy football success. So, in my opinion, the production profile that we're looking at Jaxon Smith-Njigba's is probably the best in the class. It is the best attribute for him as a prospect. His profile makes it so easy to bet on him because he checks pretty much every box from an analytics perspective that you could want. He produced a great season as a 19-year-old true sophomore with Chris Olave on one side, Garrett Wilson on the other side. Those guys were taking away coverage. They were taking away targets. They were taking away production, and he still produced nonetheless. Not to mention the fact that he kept a future elite prospect in Marvin Harrison Jr. on the bench with the two upperclassmen, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, plus JSN working as the primary wide receivers in 2021. We didn't get to see how that dynamic would play out this year because he was dealing with a hamstring injury pretty much all of 2022. I don't really ding him very much for that in my grade, but it is worth noting that we probably would have gotten a little bit more certainty about his ability to work on the outside, his ability to continue to command targets despite great target competition with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka coming out this year. Best season yards per team pass attempt of 3.25, which ranked second in this entire class. Like I said, with by far the most difficult target competition that any wide receiver faced in the 2023 NFL draft. He had better target competition than Jordan Addison, than Josh Downs, than Zay Flowers, than Quentin Johnston, any of these dudes that you really like. There's nobody that competed for targets like JSN with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave for the most part. So also had a breakout age in the 75th percentile, highest single season PFF receiving grade of anybody in this class. His sophomore grade of 91.9 beats the sophomore grade of Jordan Addison, who actually won the Biletnikoff that year, of 89. Yards per route run of over 4, which was the second highest since 2017 among all Power 5 wide receivers. So we're talking about a guy that just had a monster season. Only Devontae Smith, I believe, in his Heisman winning campaign had a higher yards per route run. And for any minor on-field concerns that I may have about JSN, this profile more than makes up for it and makes me willing to bet on him. So a few other minor things that factored into my grade. These are more kind of subjective things that not everybody else are going to agree on. But I think I should have seen him play with a little bit more physicality, a little bit more toughness. I just wanted to see him be a little bit more feistier, especially in contested situations and blocking in the run game. He played that way when he had the ball in his hands. It just wasn't always consistent in all phases of playing wide receiver. And I made mention to the lack of a downfield route tree as well. When he ran routes downfield, it was usually like slot fades, wheel routes, etc. And they were usually mismatches. The only time he ran downfield routes was when he had a safety on him, a nickel corner, a linebacker, whatever the case was, which is why his downfield stats look very, very impressive. He actually leads the class with a 141.8 quarterback rating when targeted downfield. And the reason for that is because when he was actually targeted 20 plus yards downfield, it was usually because he had like a linebacker or a safety on him. And Ryan Day and the Ohio State offense and CJ Stroud took advantage of that mismatch. So as good as Jaxon Smith-Njigba is, he was schemed perfectly and he was in the perfect role for his skill set at Ohio State. And he also, like I said, was playing with such great wide receivers that he was often seeing the third best corner on the team. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, the fact that he had to compete for targets with these guys, but he also wasn't seeing number one corners. He wasn't seeing shadow coverage on the outside like some other wide receivers in this class were. So final grades for JSN, he scored 955 out of 1,100 for me in my grading system, or a mid first round talent. He is not my wide receiver one, and a lot of people are going to get mad about that in my grading system, but he is literally 2.5 points behind Jordan Addison for my wide receiver 2, and draft capital and landing spot will absolutely determine who ends up being my wide receiver 1 and who I end up taking first in rookie drafts. They are neck and neck for me, so don't go down to the comments and yell at me for having him wide receiver 2 and I'm stupid and I hate JSN because he isn't wide receiver 1 for me. He very well could be after the NFL draft. So this is just my pre-draft rankings based on my film watching and my process. If he goes 21st overall to the Los Angeles Chargers and Jordan Addison falls to the second round, I'm probably going to take JSN first. So he will still be my wide receiver 1 if that happens. But for me right now, Addison has the slight edge. JSN's grade is precisely the same grade I had on Treylon Burks last year, which would have made him my wide receiver 3 in last year's class, just behind Garrett Wilson and Drake London as my wide receiver 2 and 1, respectively, including Jordan Addison. This is actually the wide receiver 6 grade that I've given since I refined my grading process in 2021, just behind Jamar Chase, who has the highest grade in my process for a wide receiver, Devontae Smith, Drake London, Garrett Wilson, and then, of course, Jordan Addison, who's slightly ahead of him right now. So still a very, very high grade. My pro comparison for JSN is pretty simple. He's a Monroe St. Brown 2.0, and he has a slightly better athletic profile, so that makes him have a little bit more upside to play on the outside, but they're both going to be better suited to be volume hog slot wide receivers at the NFL level who excel in zone coverage and they're great after the catch. The difference, like I said, is that JSN's a better athlete, and I think he can develop into a 3-level threat more so than Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's probably limited to short and intermediate targets. You guys can see my player card on the screen there. Those are available on Patreon until the NFL draft, and those are the games that I studied and all that kind of stuff. Those are my notes on him, so definitely look that over. His ideal landing spot, like I said, for Amon-Ra St. Brown is going to a pass-heavy offense, carve out a high-volume role, ideally for a good quarterback. Perfect fit for him, in my opinion, is the Los Angeles Chargers because Kellen Moore can deploy him like CeeDee Lamb, where we saw CeeDee Lamb primarily play in the slot as a rookie, and then he developed into more of an outside wide receiver as his career and as he got better. I also really like the Texans at 12 because I think with Bryce Young or CJ Stroud, whoever they end up drafting coming in, he'll be a great number one target for those guys. There's not a lot of target competition on that team. Same goes for the Giants at 25 outside of Darren Waller and Saquon Barkley. They don't have a whole lot going on over there. And I think JSN could carve out an awesome role on those teams, and even New England at 14, which is where his average draft position is according to Grinding the Mocks. I still like that fit because he can be like Jacoby Myers on crack. I know, Mac Jones and the Patriots offense isn't like a pass-heavy offense, but I still do like the fit if JSN were to go to the Patriots. So rookie draft outlook, this is really like the important part of the video. How do you guys want to handle him in rookie drafts? This is where it gets tricky for me because, like I said, I'm on an island with Jordan Addison, wide receiver 1. Most people view JSN as the wide receiver 1. And for me, this is the most crucial part of the video. Since I'm giving you guys advice, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do in rookie drafts on how to handle the situation because I recognize that the market believes adamantly that Jaxon Smith-Njigba is the wide receiver 1 in this class. And that's fine because they're very close for me. And I have no argument with somebody saying that they would prefer JSN over Jordan Addison. But the thing that I disagree with is the difference and the tier break that the market views between JSN and everybody else. Jordan Addison, Quentin Johnston, whatever the case is. Keep Trade Cut has him at number 4 overall in Superflex drafts, number 2 overall in one quarterback drafts. Jordan Addison is 7th overall with 1,000 value points between him and Jaxon Smith-Njigba, and Quentin Johnston is 8th overall in Superflex right now. So in my rankings, the way I have it ranked is that I believe Bijan in the top 3 quarterbacks, Bryce Young, CJ Stroud, and Anthony Richardson, are firmly ahead of both Jaxon Smith-Njigba and Jordan Addison, given positional value of those quarterbacks and given how elite Bijan Robinson is. So the way I have them ranked is Jordan Addison 105 and JSN 106. But if you wanted to flip-flop those guys, no questions asked. So the highest I would take JSN in Superflex drafts is probably 105 after those QBs and Bijan Robinson is off the board if he's your wide receiver 1. And the highest I would take him in one quarterback leagues is 102. So even though I have wide receiver 1, Jordan Addison, I am not trying to outsmart the market here. I'm not trying to say I'm smarter than all of you guys. You should have Jordan Addison wide receiver 1. If I'm in a rookie draft, I am not going to take Jordan Addison over JSN if I don't have to. So if I have pick 102 and 104 in a one quarterback draft, I'm going to take JSN first because I know that Jordan Addison's probably going to fall to me at 104 if I understand my league market correctly. And I'd probably do some, reconnaissance on the 103 manager to see which receiver he likes. Maybe he likes Jahmyr Gibbs. Maybe he likes Quentin Johnston, whatever the case is. I would probably make sure that I can get Jordan Addison at 104 if I take JSN 102. Or conversely, because I view Addison very closely on a level playing field to JSN, I could trade down from my 105 in Superflex where I have Jordan Addison ranked. I could go down to 107 and still get Jordan Addison there, have somebody trade up for JSN. Maybe they give me at least a second rounder. Maybe they give me a future first. Who knows if they really love JSN that much. So just because my process spit out JSN is wide receiver 2, Jordan Addison is wide receiver 1, doesn't mean I'm trying to prove that I'm smarter than everybody. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not going to pass up value by taking Jordan Addison over JSN in a rookie draft because I know that that's not how the market views it. And I know most people would take JSN, so I'm going to probably trade out of JSN picks to get Jordan Addison if I need to, or I'm going to just get some JSN shares. And if I have multiple picks in the first round, hope that I can get Jordan Addison. Our most recent listener startup, for example, the reason I didn't reach on pick 104 and 105 in our startup draft because we were drafting kickers as if they were rookie picks, and I waited until 107, 108 is because I know I can probably get both Jordan Addison and Quentin Johnston there and not have to pay up the extra round and a half in the startup that 105 went because everybody wants Jaxon Smith-Njigba. So that's kind of how I'm going to work the board. If I'm in an actual rookie draft, I might trade down. I might swap picks, whatever the case is. That is how I'm handling Jaxon Smith-Njigba in rookie drafts. But of course, I do want some shares of him myself because I do believe he is a great prospect and I'm willing to pony up for him. So that is the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And also, if you want access to all my rookie rankings, all my dynasty rankings, best ball rankings, bonus content, bonus video content, databases, everything I use to make these, scouting determinations, go check out flockfantasy.com. Use the promo code FSE when you sign up to get a 2-day free trial, to get 30% off all packages, and get 6 months free when you sign up annually. And you can see all the value that we have to offer over there at Fantasy Stock Exchange. And of course, if you're unaware, you guys will also get the bonus content of Mason over at Fantasy Flock, Zach and Madake over at Fantasyland and Dynastyland, and Pierre and Chris over at Fantasy Endgame, because we've partnered up to bring you guys this great site. So definitely check that out. Link down below in the description, link down below in the pinned comment. Check out our sponsors down below in the description as well if you're interested. But with that being said, peace out, and we'll talk to you soon.